Trump has just fired his lead defense attorney in the middle of his most serious criminal trial, and the reason is shocking. Sources close to his legal team say Trump demanded that his lawyer argue the judge should be arrested for treason. When the attorney refused, warning it would lead to immediate disbarment, Trump told him to leave. This marks the fourth legal team he's discarded in just 18 months, and this time it happened with the jury already seated. Throughout his career, Trump has had a famously contentious relationship with his attorneys, pushing them to make legally baseless arguments, insisting they personally attack judges, and publicly blaming them when cases go poorly. But now he's done it at the absolute worst possible moment, with his freedom on the line and a jury ready to hear opening statements. It's almost unbelievable that he would sabotage his own defense in this way. This isn't just a clash between a difficult client and his lawyers. It's a full-blown meltdown at the center of MAGA world, with supporters turning on one another over who's to blame and what comes next. Behind the scenes, the chaos is even more extreme than what's visible to the public. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. Trump's relationship with defense attorneys has been troubled since long before his presidency. He's notorious for not paying legal bills, for contradicting his lawyer strategies on social media, and for demanding they make arguments that put their bar licenses at risk. From the get-go, representing Trump has been considered a career risk in legal circles, with many top attorneys refusing to take him on as a client, despite the high profile of his cases, whether it was the revolving door of lawyers during the Mueller investigation, the difficulty finding representation for his impeachment trials, or the exodus of attorneys during the classified documents case. Trump has really cemented himself as the most difficult client in American legal history. Here's where the situation hits the breaking point. According to Politico's December 4th report, tensions boiled over during a strategy session just 3 days before opening statements. Trump's lead attorney presented the defense theory they had spent months crafting, a careful technical argument centered on prosecutorial overreach and constitutional protections. Trump reportedly listened for about 10 minutes before exploding, demanding that the lawyer stand in court and accuse the judge of being a deep state operative who should face criminal charges. This chaos stems from Trump's inability to separate legal strategy from political theater. He wants the courtroom to feel like one of his rallies, complete with attacks on enemies and messaging for his base. But trials don't work that way, and his attorneys know that following his instincts would be disastrous. They tried to explain that accusing a sitting federal judge of treason would trigger immediate sanctions, possible disbarment, and ruin any chance with the jury. Trump, reportedly unfazed, responded that he'd rather lose as a fighter than win as a coward. Let's be clear, criminal defendants do have the right to make their own choices about their defense. But there's a stark difference between bold strategy and professional suicide. No ethical attorney can comply with demands like Trump's without risking everything. And the fallout is immediate. Reports from December 5th show just how far the collapse has gone. CNN reported that 3 more attorneys from Trump's team resigned within hours of the lead counsel's firing, submitting letters to the court stating that the attorney-client relationship had become untenable and that they could no longer continue representation in good conscience. The judge was reportedly furious. Courtroom reporters say she called an emergency hearing, demanding to know how Trump planned to proceed with a trial set to start in just 72 hours. Standing before the court was Trump's remaining attorney, a relatively inexperienced lawyer whose background was mainly in real estate, visibly shaken. He requested a 6-month continuance to give new counsel time to prepare. The judge denied the request, emphasizing that Trump had ample time to prepare and that the deliberate dismantling of his own legal teams did not justify a delay. She made it clear the trial would proceed on schedule and instructed Trump to either secure qualified counsel willing to work under his terms or prepare to represent himself. Put simply, Trump has left himself facing trial with a skeleton crew of inexperienced attorneys against a team of veteran federal prosecutors who have been building this case for more than 2 years. This isn't persecution or unfair treatment. It's entirely self-inflicted. The announcement sent immediate shockwaves through MAGA circles, raising urgent questions about what happens if Trump is convicted. Appeals require competent trial representation, and claims of ineffective assistance of counsel almost always fail when the defendant is responsible for the breakdown. In effect, Trump may have eliminated his own legal safety nets. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen Trump destroy relationships with his own defenders. This pattern of turning on the people trying to help him has manifested repeatedly throughout his career. Just think about how he treated Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani sacrificed his reputation, his law license, and ultimately his financial security defending Trump's election fraud claims. He did everything Trump asked, held press conferences at Four Seasons Total Landscaping, made wild allegations in court, and faced defamation judgments in the hundreds of millions. And how did Trump repay him? He refused to pay Giuliani's legal bills, distanced himself when Giuliani faced disbarment, and reportedly won't take his calls anymore. Then there was Sidney Powell. Acting on Trump's direction, she pushed some of the most extreme election conspiracy theories, facing sanctions and professional consequences as a result. When she eventually pleaded guilty in the Georgia case and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, Trump's team dismissed her as a coffee girl who was never truly part of the inner circle, despite video evidence showing her in strategy meetings at the White House. And the pattern continues with the parade of attorneys in the classified documents case. Trump cycled through multiple legal teams, with lawyers withdrawing due to irreconcilable differences, a polite way of saying the client refused to follow legal advice and insisted on actions that could destroy their careers. Each resignation was met with Trump publicly attacking the departing attorneys. Even during his second impeachment trial, his lawyers were placed in impossible positions. Trump reportedly demanded they argue that he had actually won the 2020 election, forcing them to focus on narrow procedural defenses because making the claims Trump wanted would have constituted professional misconduct. Now, the current legal team appears to have joined this long line of people who tried to help Trump and ended up burned. The pattern is unmistakable. You can work around the clock, risk your reputation, and give everything you have, but the moment you tell Trump something he doesn't want to hear, you're out. So what triggered this latest explosion? It all comes down to Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of what lawyers can and cannot do. The standoff happened because Trump wanted a theatrical confrontation while his attorneys were trying to win an actual legal case. Prosecutors were ready with documentary evidence, witness testimony, and a clear narrative of criminal conduct. The defense needed to respond with reasoned arguments about intent, procedure, and reasonable doubt. Trump, meanwhile, wanted his lawyers to put on a show for the cameras. Here's where things really took a turn. Sources who spoke to MSNBC say Trump became convinced his own lawyers were secretly working against him. He reportedly told advisors that no true fighter would ever declare certain arguments off limits, and that any attorney unwilling to attack the judge must be compromised. This paranoid reading of standard legal guidance has left Trump increasingly isolated from anyone willing to offer straightforward counsel. While legal ethics demand that attorneys vigorously defend their clients, they also forbid making frivolous claims, misleading courts, or engaging in conduct that undermines the profession. These aren't arbitrary rules. They are the backbone of a system that depends on trust between courts and advocates. Trump, however, interprets these professional limits as signs of disloyalty rather than responsibility. That was the moment chaos truly erupted inside MAGA circles. Supporters began turning on one another, blaming different parties for the mess. Some insisted the attorneys were deep state operatives secretly sabotaging Trump. Others argued he had to heed professional advice if he wanted to avoid prison. The resulting battle is now playing out across social media, podcasts, and increasingly heated confrontations at Trump rallies. Then Steve Bannon stepped in, turning the situation even more combustible. On his podcast, he declared that any attorney who refuses to fight with everything at their disposal is a traitor to the movement, and that Trump should represent himself if necessary. He likened Trump to historical figures who defended themselves against perceived injustice, conveniently glossing over the fact that many of those comparisons involved individuals who were convicted and imprisoned. When legal experts warned that self-representation in a complex federal case is virtually suicidal, Bannon doubled down. He argued that the legal system is so corrupt that conventional defense strategies are meaningless, insisting Trump should use the trial as a stage to expose the deep state rather than trying to win under rigged rules. This left Trump's remaining supporters in an impossible position. On one hand, they're told that true fighting means rejecting any lawyer who counsels caution, framing competent legal advice as betrayal. On the other, anyone with real legal knowledge knows that following Bannon's advice would almost guarantee conviction. Self-representation against federal prosecutors isn't a fight. It's surrender disguised as defiance. Trump himself appears genuinely torn between these two extremes. Now, the MAGA movement is trapped in a bind. They can push Trump to accept professional counsel, but that requires convincing him that taking advice isn't weakness, a hard sell when the movement has long framed the system as corrupt. Or they can encourage him to go it alone, relying on inexperienced loyalists. which means watching him face federal prosecutors unprepared and almost certainly facing conviction and possible imprisonment. It's a difficult situation and entirely a crisis of Trump's own making. For years, he's told supporters that any institution that limits him is corrupt. Now, those very institutions are closing in, and the lawyers who could guide him through the legal minefield keep getting fired for giving honest advice. The result is complete chaos within his political operation. If Trump can't keep a legal team intact for a single trial, every other part of his campaign and operation becomes unstable. Staff are wondering if they'll be next. Donors are questioning whether their money is being spent wisely. Political advisors are scrambling to figure out how to manage a client who keeps creating new crises. Even Republican defenders are facing impossible questions from the press. CBS News reports that several GOP senators simply walked away when asked whether Trump should represent himself, as Bannon suggested. Meanwhile, the most fervent supporters are escalating their rhetoric. Some MAGA online communities are now suggesting that any conviction should be met with civil disobedience, or worse. The gap between legal reality and base expectations is widening dangerously. Tensions spiked even further when Trump posted on Truth Social that he was considering representing himself, saying at least he would fight. The post was deleted within an hour, but screenshots circulated widely, fueling speculation about what might happen next. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen a criminal defendant of this profile engage in this level of self-sabotage since, well, never. This is genuinely unprecedented territory. Alan Dershowitz, who has defended Trump publicly on legal issues, went on Fox News and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that as someone who has always defended Trump's right to vigorous representation, watching him systematically destroy his own legal teams is painful, noting that no one can help a client who won't be helped. Just think about that for a moment. Even Dershowitz, one of Trump's most reliable legal defenders, is publicly expressing dismay. And this is coming from someone who rarely criticizes Trump on anything. Ty Cobb, Trump's former White House lawyer, was even more blunt in an interview with CNN. He said Trump is committing legal suicide in slow motion and doing so in a way that may eliminate any appellate remedies, since courts are unlikely to find ineffective assistance when the defendant himself drove away competent counsel. So let's break down what this meltdown could mean. This isn't just a gripping legal drama. It has serious consequences for Trump, his movement, and American politics. First, the immediate trial impact. Trump will enter opening statements with attorneys who have had days, not months, to prepare. The prosecution holds a massive structural advantage. Jurors will witness the chaos and inevitably form judgments about the defendant's credibility and decision-making. The likelihood of conviction has risen sharply. Legal observers who once considered this case difficult for prosecutors are now revising their assessments upward. When a defendant actively sabotages his own defense, the prosecution's task becomes far easier. Next, the implications for the MAGA movement. The internal divisions exposed by this crisis are deepening, not disappearing. The faction demanding all-out warfare now opposes anyone advocating strategic thinking. These camps are increasingly seeing each other as traitors rather than allies with tactical disagreements. If Trump is convicted, these divisions could erupt. Some will blame the attorneys for not fighting hard enough. Others will blame Trump for ignoring counsel. Still others may reject the verdict entirely. The movement, long held together by Trump's dominance, risks fracturing when that dominance is challenged by the threat of prison. Finally, the electoral implications. Republican candidates will face relentless questions about whether they support a nominee who is potentially convicted and who undermined his own defense. The spectacle of Trump firing lawyers for refusing to commit professional misconduct does not resonate with swing voters who value stability and competence. Here's the situation. Donald Trump just dismantled his legal defense team days before trial because they refused to make arguments that could have ended their careers. He now faces federal prosecutors with inexperienced counsel, while his supporters are fighting among themselves over whether professional representation is a betrayal. This isn't just about one obstinate defendant. It's about whether the MAGA movement can survive contact with institutions that won't bend to Trump's will. Courts have rules, lawyers have ethical duties, juries weigh evidence. None of these systems respond to the tactics that succeed at rallies. If Trump is convicted because he refused competent counsel, we're seeing the consequences of building a movement on the rejection of expertise and institutional knowledge. In other words, the very anti-establishment ethos that created MAGA is now undermining its leader's ability to defend himself. This goes far beyond the trial. It's a test of whether a political movement can function when anyone who delivers uncomfortable truths to the leader is considered the enemy. Watch closely. The situation is deteriorating by the hour. New attorneys may appear. Trump may attempt self-representation. The trial could produce daily crises. And the MAGA civil war over who failed Trump is just beginning. The stakes have never been higher, the chaos never more complete, and the consequences never more significant for everyone who has tied their future to Donald Trump.